This panel is the scientific research from the Gaudiya Vaishnava perspective. Our first speaker is Mauricio Garrido, who earned his PhD in physics from Ohio University and then conducted his postdoctoral research at Columbia in New York. His presentations have included a paper on the Big Bang and the interfaces of knowledge at a conference in Switzerland co-sponsored by CERN and Wilton Park. He presented a mathematical model of the modes of material nature at the Tucson Science of Consciousness Conference, and the following year, I believe that was 2017, he was invited to teach Sanskrit here at the Religions Department of the University of Florida, Gainesville. Would you please join me in welcoming to the podium Mauricio Garrido.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for coming on to this final day of the of this conference, and I hope to be able to make this a good session for you. A lot of the people here are practitioners of the Gaudiya Vaishnava. Is this too loud? Anyway. A lot of the people here are practitioners of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, and a lot of questions arise when it comes to, okay, let us start getting into consciousness studies. The main idea of this conference is to inspire a new generation of scientists to come forward and try to take up research in consciousness studies. We have seen in the presentations of Stuart Hameroff that the topic of science and consciousness is actually going on. It's not a new thing. We are entering a discussion that is already going on. So with that, we have opportunities and we have challenges. So the important point that I want you to take from this is that there is a great scope for those in the Gaudiya Vaishnavism to enter into that discussion. Now, we want to do good science. I don't know how many of you saw this report by the BBC. I think it was last week, where it said that there were some people that in a science conference in India were claiming that Einstein was wrong, and this made like huge head news everywhere around the world, saying like, well, this is a scientific conference, and these people are coming in and saying Einstein is wrong, and the Vedas were always right, and they always proved everything else that there is here. This is a circus. That we don't want. We don't want to be those people. We want to be able to do good science and good theology, good philosophy. So the question is then, okay, how can I go into it? What can I do? Right? That was the main question, at least for me, years ago, when I was doing my PhD. I was going like, okay, I can see how I can, how a person in the medical field can contribute. I can see how maybe somebody in the psychology field can contribute. I don't see how a physicist can contribute here directly. And it took me some years to start looking at all the possibilities, and once it started coming in, a rush flood of ideas started coming in. And that is what we want to be able to present to you today. Possibilities for you to explore and say like, wow, well, maybe somebody's talk here today will inspire you and say like, wow, that is really great. Now I get this great idea that I want to start doing by myself. This research idea that I want to, in my own field, to do. Maybe that will happen. Or maybe it won't. So then there's second opportunity, which is trying to find people that maybe you say, well, this person I can work with. You know, maybe you don't get your own idea, but this person has a great idea, and I want to collaborate with that person. So that is a second possibility. And then there's a third possibility, which is, well, maybe you didn't find anybody that, you know, specifically, you know, like, yeah, I can collaborate with like that. But we want to present possibilities of groups that are needing people with specific types of talents or focuses on their specific fields. So these are the three types of things we want you to keep an eye out for, especially in these breakout sessions. The whole point of the breakout sessions that we're going to go into is for you to look into these things. Is there an idea that immediately pops out for me? Or is there somebody that I can say, I would like to collaborate with that person? Or is there a project that I can plug into? Right? So that by the end of this conference, it's not just like, well, that was a nice conference. Now, you know, back to the lab. But actually, I want to do something. I've been inspired, and I have a small project that I want to start getting into, or maybe a big project. So, as I mentioned, there's going to be four within the breakout sessions. There's going to be four specific types of projects, big projects that we want you to explore. One of them, for example, is the self-sustainability in farms. That is going to be with Kalakanta Prabhu. He's going to lead that up, and you know, somebody, for example, how many engineers are here? Okay, very good, nice. So some of the engineers might say, like, well, you know, I don't know what to research, you know, in terms of consciousness here. You know, like, I'm an engineer. What can I do here? Maybe something like consciousness in self-sustainability, you know, could be an opportunity there. You know, there are like these beautiful farms all over the world, not only within our society, but also, you know, within the you know, human society at large, that are trying to develop self-sustainable systems. And they need people that are thinking about how to create, with the restrictions that they have in their land and the resources that they have there, how can I create, you know, self-sustainable systems? Well, you can be part of that, right? Or also, you know, not only engineers, but also biologists, ecologists. So many people can go into that project. Then there's also the idea of curriculum for schools, right? How many educators are here? Very good. So, you know, you can say, like, well, I'm an educator. I don't do like research, right? Well, what if you are able to help bring down that high, lofty knowledge that is going over everybody's head and bring it down to the general public? That is a great service. You know, that is something that is needed. So, you know, there you can do it. Or maybe you would like to be inspired by the Temple of Vedic Planetarium. There's a planetarium that is being built, and you could be part of that. They need help in many different branches of science. And how many people in the humanities are here? Okay, so those people that are, for example, into Hindu studies, you know, theology and all of these. What if we were able to, or computer engineers, all right? What if we are able to create a Veda-base? A Veda-base that has all the Vedas. That if you wanted to know, you know, put in a word like, I don't know, gravity or atom, you could find, okay, this is where, you know, the word gravity comes into the Vaisheshika Sutras. or the word atom maybe in the Rig Veda or something like that, like have all the Vedas in there. This will require a huge amount of people, people that will be able to create databases to be able to sort this out, people that will be able to translate all of these manuscripts that are in Sanskrit or in regional languages like Tamil, Malayan, and so many of these into English so that it can be accessible to everybody in the world. Now, this is something that would not benefit only, the small ISKCON society, but it could benefit all the world. So my point here to all of you is that there are so many possibilities of projects where so many people are needed. This is a chance for us to start thinking about it. There is so much to do in terms of consciousness studies. Even if you come out of here just thinking about okay, the next time that I open up, some scripture like the Bhagavad Gita or the Bhagavatam, maybe you think about you're looking at it with new eyes. You're thinking of it not just in terms of philosophy, but now in terms of science and how you can make research on that. In fact, that was one of the things that was very inspiring for one of our devotees here that I would like to invite and here to the podium for a second and share how he was reading the scriptures but with scientific eyes.
So before I became familiar with Krishna consciousness or had met any devotees, I was a biologist, sort of unusual biologist, you'll see in a minute. I was doing research for my master's degree, my Master of Science degree, and my subject was, the topic of my research was, a biochemical, biological, and biopsychological study of oxygenated and unoxygenated erythrocytes. Erythrocytes are red blood corpuscles. So, why was I doing that? Well, I had a very strange biochemistry professor, otherwise it would have been impossible for me to do anything like this, because in those days we couldn't talk about consciousness. It was absolutely forbidden to even think about consciousness in science in those days, but so we called it biopsychology. It was sort of like Prabhupada using antimatter to introduce the idea of spirit into science. So biopsychology actually meant something else, but for us it was studying consciousness. And, well, there were some ideas, I guess they were satanic cults that had this practice of taking blood from people when they're dying or before they die, and then they can reincarnate into those people's bodies. I don't know if any of you have heard of this. It's not scientifically or even politically correct to talk about these things, but we knew that there's something to do with blood and consciousness. So Dr. Pratt had me researching. I started out with the biochemistry. He was a biochemist. It's just doing paper chromatography of blood. Unfortunately, it was cow's blood that we got from a slaughterhouse, and we prevented some of it from getting in touch with oxygen, and others was oxygenated, and we just compared the chemistry of the two. You can separate out the chemicals in the... But it was pretty challenging thinking about how are we going to really study oxygenated and unoxygenated red blood corpuscles, not in vitro, but in vivo in the living system. And I was actually imagining I would stick some needles in my arm and get out some blood and have it circulating and studying it like that. But fortunately, because I didn't have to deal with the cow's blood anymore, I met Hare Krishna devotees. And I won't tell the story about how I became a devotee, but I will say something that stunned me, shocked me when I read it in Bhagavad Gita as it is, to 17, know that which pervades the entire body is indestructible. No one is able to destroy the imperishable soul. And in the purport, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada writes, the individual atomic soul is definitely there in the heart, along with the supersoul, and thus all the energies of bodily movement are emanating from this part of the body. The corpuscles, which carry the oxygen from the lungs, gather energy from the soul. When the soul passes away from this position, activity of the blood generating fusion ceases. When I read that, I said, oh my God, this guy already knows what I'm trying to research. So this is a whole area of investigation, scientific investigation, that as far as I know, nobody has even thought of pursuing, but we need to. Somebody needs to study blood, oxygenated red blood corpuscles, and devise some experiments to demonstrate how consciousness is related.
Okay, so that is just, one idea for research. There are very interesting ideas in the Hindu scriptures, and the more you look into it, the more you will find. Maybe it will not be telling you all the what was again that oxygenated and non-oxygenated erythrocytes. So maybe it will not be telling you, here's the Sanskrit word for it, erythrocytes. Yeah, I can't even pronounce it in English. So it might not be able to tell you that word specifically, but there might be some hints as to the basics or the general idea behind it that will inspire you to do something. Some scientists will find their inspiration in dreams. Some scientists find it, when they're looking at a painting. So why can't we find it by looking at the Vedas? Right? In fact, there are so many interesting things that can come out just by that possibility. Anybody remember the periodic table of elements? Very good. So it has columns and rows, and according to certain standards of it will be, an element will be placed in a certain place or not another, right? And many of the elements that are there right now were actually discovered because they said there must be an element right here, right? Now, the person who discovered it, interestingly enough, his name is Mendeleev, and he was Russian. We have here some Russians, right? So he was a Russian scientist working at the moment when he thought about it in St. Petersburg. Now, he was writing, his book on that, and next door to him, he had some colleagues I think his name was von Bötel. He was a Sanskritist, and he was translating. He was creating not translating, but he was creating a dictionary from Sanskrit into German. And while he was doing that, he showed him, oh yeah, by the way, this is the Sanskrit alphabet. It has, these rows and columns, and according to the sound, you will place a certain letter here. And, it's a very scientific way of putting, the letters. And Mendeleev looked at that and he was stunned. He was like, wow, this is very interesting. Now, a couple of, I don't know exactly how much after that he had a dream. And in that dream, he saw all the elements in that formation. And when he woke up, he immediately wrote it down. And because of this, inspiration, the places for the new elements that were not there, he started giving them Sanskrit names, like Eka silicon. So we can derive very interesting, ideas for research, and at the same time we can do the opposite. We can do cross-pollination, right? We were seeing yesterday how maybe we can look back at our scriptures and say like, well, do we really understand this, right? I think Radhika Raman Prabhu, he was talking about how, yeah, in fact, are we taking the first meaning, which is completely not nonsensical to our logic. Maybe we should take a secondary meaning, or just to make sense of it, and maybe that might be a better reading of the scriptures. So this cross-pollination is important for us to look into, and to have intellectual integrity while we do it. I think that would help, really bring people's, understanding further, not only in science, but also in their faith. Now, there are some doubts that come about when we start looking into this, right? For example, the most blaring one is, this research will jeopardize my career. How many people have thought about that? Right? I started looking, for example, I'm a molecular biologist or something like that, and I started looking into evolution. That's the end of it. End of the career, right? Or if I say certain things. So one thing is to recognize that we have here three audiences. We have an audience of scientists, we have an audience of general public, and we have an audience of bhakti practitioners. So you have different avenues in which your research can go to, where you don't have to necessarily, go all out and say like, I'm pro or against, this very debated topic, that will jeopardize my career. It can be something softer. And as I mentioned, for example, maybe you won't want to publish in a scientific journal, but the people who are doing education for schools that want to incorporate consciousness studies in them, they would very much appreciate your contribution, even if it's anonymous. We also have the Temple of Vedic Planetarium, which would also very much appreciate your contribution, even if it's anonymous. Right? And some of this research doesn't have to be necessarily confrontational. It doesn't. All the research in here doesn't have to necessarily involve us going and trying to bash science. It can be something like, as I mentioned, self-sustainability. Can we create research for that? That's non-confrontational. Another question, another doubt that appears when we start thinking about, well, if I go into this type of research, is the fact that, well, there's religion, which deals with consciousness, and then there is the world of matter, which science deals with, and we should keep the two apart. We should keep them separated. That idea mainly comes from the fear of jeopardizing the career, right? As I mentioned, you don't have to necessarily jeopardize your career, and furthermore, it has been recognized even by some scientists, by some philosophers that are atheists, like Thomas Nagel, that there is a very big need for a major transformation in sciences to be able to answer the most fundamental questions. And this comes from an atheist that says, like, we need something different. We have a very interesting proposition. We have many different interesting propositions in our philosophy, and we should not be shy to explore them. But we should do it, we should lead it with high quality science and scholarship. Now, the other thing is that somebody might say, well, if we try to do both of them, if we try to do science and philosophy or science and religion, we'll end up doing neither of them well. That's another fear, right? Well, that is why we need a big team of experts, right? I can't be a pundit and a scientist and everything else in between. We have people that are extremely learned in the scriptures. We have people that are extremely learned in geology. We have people that are with all of this, then you just focus on what you're good at. Let us not try to go too much out of our comfort zone. There's a certain comfort zone where we can actually speak with authority. That is why we're addressing scientists here, not the general public. Another idea is that maybe, and these are ideas that I've heard as I've been talking to scientists, devotees around. So these are ideas that come about. So another question that comes about is that, well, the Indian philosophical texts only deal with religion and not with the material world. How many of you think that is true? We just saw an example where it's not that is not the case. The Vedic scriptures, they give lots of information on the transcendent and also lots of information on the material world, because we have to navigate through that material world to get to transcendence. And because of that knowledge, that wealth of knowledge, we have an opportunity to get ideas for research. Let me see. Oh yeah, well then there is the one of time, right? Where do I find time? I have all of these committees, and I have to do research and grant writing, and there's also, I have a family, and kids and like that, and I have to do my rounds and go to the temple. It's like, oh my God, where am I going to find time here, right? You're asking me to go into that. Well, what we say is take up a small side project. Small, achievable side project. And begin with that. The idea is just begin. Just start something. If we try to make things too big, it's like, oh yeah, well maybe one day we'll actually start researching. No, start now. Start with parallels that you already have maybe looked into, like this thing of the heart, right? Then there's also, let me see. Okay, yeah, then there's also the idea that, well, I don't think it's going to work. Mainstream science will never, accept any of these ideas. So, why are we going to do it? Research like that of Dr. Dharmela, who spoke about the effects of the Mahamantra on heart rate variability, and he was able to publish it, showed that this is possible. In my own experience, when I have been going to conferences and showing them, mathematical models of the gunas and the intelligence in ways that they can relate to, and things that they are important for them, have shown me that if we just are able to engage in their language, in the things that they are interested in, people are actually willing to open up their ears and say like, okay, what do you have to say about this? Especially when we're coming in from a position of authority. Of authority in our own fields. So these are just some thoughts on the possibilities and the challenges that we're facing. We have about a minute 40 for any questions that anybody has or any comments that anybody would like to have. Yes.
Question. At the beginning of your talk, thank you for your talk. At the beginning, you mentioned an article as an example of bad science. And I was thinking that, so this is my question, that seemed to be, and I don't know anything about the article or anything, but in terms of that, it seemed to be a derivative of whatever was done, whether it was good or bad as far as the science. It was, in other words, newspaper articles, et cetera, are kind of derivatives of whatever happens. And in someone's presentation, there was presented the idea of doing research. I think it was the PAIR project, was just publishing and see what, do the science and publish the results of the science and let that speak for itself. So that seemed to be kind of two messages there in terms of what we want or what is desirable in terms of your presentation. In terms of are we concerned, is our initial concern the derivative from it, like as far as in that example, the newspaper articles, or is the emphasis on doing actually just what is considered good science?
Well, the idea of doing good science is important, regardless of anything. We want to be able to do good science, good philosophy. What I've seen most of the times is that whenever there's anything to do with Hinduism and science, is that somebody will come here, they will speak a little bit about science, that they have read from some popular science book, and then make this huge metaphysical leap. And then they'll claim, like God exists or everything is one and things like that. And then that's what really, gets the scientists like, oh my God, I don't want to deal with that. That is what we don't want. We want to be able to engage with them with very interesting ideas that will, pick their brains, that will, excite them and say like, oh, maybe there is something here. We don't have to necessarily be the ones like leading the mainstream science or anything like that. What we want is at least to be able to be heard and say, okay, that's another possibility. Among all the possible scientific ideas, this is another idea. Where they got it from, well, a dream or, their scriptures, whatever, but, it's a good idea. All right. Thank you very much.